This looks like a great spot to camp for the night. There's somebody already camping.
Yeah, I'm so ready to stop. Hi, I'm John, and this is my partner Sally.
Hi, I'm Nigel. Nice to meet you.
Hey, isn't it great to live in a country that's so clean? Not like other countries where they have cholera in their rivers. Here you can drink straight out of the river.
You'd be a brave person to do that. A lot of people think that, but it's not true. Our streams and rivers can look really clean, but it's not always safe to drink unless you bring it to the boil. You get some water, I'll light the fire and we'll have ourselves a cup of tea.
So, what kinds of bugs and germy things are in there?
Well, you've got a number of things. For example, there are bacteria, which are tiny single-celled organisms.
It's not fair. Bacteria have got such a bad name. A lot of it's actually really good for humans.
Yeah, it's just a few. Spoil it for the rest of us.
What? What? What are you looking at?
Then there are protozoa, which are also single-celled organisms, but they're a lot bigger than bacteria.
Are you feeling hot? Or is it just me?
Well, they're still too small to see with the naked eye, though.
Oh yeah, they're microscopic. But even smaller than bacteria are viruses.
Don't know how long I can hold on.
They can be quite hard to kill.
Wow, you're quite the expert, aren't you?
Well, it should be. Part of my job's keeping an eye on small water supplies around the region.
Shame you weren't with us on our last holiday. It was a disaster.
Yeah, it wasn't our best holiday. It was our midwinter ski trip. Sally and me and our 2 daughters. We'd usually meet up with some friends once a year.
Nice.
Yeah, the first thing I heard something was wrong was when I was standing in the queue for the lift. The ski lift, and 2 instructors in front of me. One of them said to the other one, "Are you sick yet?" Because just about everyone else I know is. So that's when I first got an inkling that there might be something wrong.
Oh, this is last July at the local ski field.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I was part of the team that got called in. That was quite a bad outbreak.
Bad is the word. We'd been skiing all day, and we're at the mini-golf later in the evening, and my daughter was feeling fine one minute, and then she threw up on the course.
Which wasn't a good look.
And that was when the illness started in the children.
My other daughter didn't throw up, but just felt a bit off colour and had a bit of a temperature one night.
And I was worse. I had diarrhoea, vomited a couple of times, and then had diarrhoea for about 7 days.
Oh, bad luck. I suspect you probably had cryptosporidiosis, or a Campylobacter infection rather than norovirus infection, which I suspect is what you and the kids had a touch of, John. A norovirus infection usually goes away after a couple of days.
One of our friend's children was also really crook. She had a full night staying up and vomiting. High fevers for 2.5 days.
Again, that sounds like norovirus.
Yeah, we heard later it was something in the water. You could buy bottled water, but it was quite warm in the cafeteria, so I just kept on filling my bottle from the water font. You can only drink so much coffee before you get the jitters, and the kids did the same.
Anyway, next morning was when I started feeling really sick, so we didn't hang around. That was the end of the holiday for us, and I really don't want to talk about the trip home.
Apparently there were quite a few people sick like us. I saw it on the news.
Yeah, I actually had a big part of that investigation. Probably just after you guys left. We started getting information from local GPs, and they were seeing an increased number of people with gastro-type problems. So I raced up there to check it out. It was a bit like trying to solve a whodunit. It was 11 AM. I was the first investigator on the scene. Immediately, I could see something was wrong. I met with management and suggested first off that the cleaners wear gloves to protect themselves and clean up any mess with a diluted bleach solution. I didn't want the cleaners to become sick too. Whatever it was, the cause had to be identified and neutralised as soon as possible. Here were my chief suspects. 1. Person-to-person spread through inadequate hand hygiene, particularly around toilet facilities. A can't stress enough how important it is to wash hands thoroughly after using the toilet and before preparing food. 2. A large food outbreak associated with one of the cafeterias. And lastly, the water supply. I continued the investigation. Here's what I knew. People from a whole range of different sites on the mountain were ill. People who had eaten in the main cafeteria were ill. But people who had eaten different kinds of food were also ill, and some people brought their own food with them. It immediately looked like it wasn't going to be a food problem, because you couldn't explain all the illness based on some food exposure. It was much wider than that. The management assured me there'd be no water issues and no problems with sewage or anything like that. So I didn't suspect the water supply. I was busy following some hand hygiene leads, but it was getting nowhere. I smelled a rat. It just didn't add up. I decided to go and pay the management another little visit. This time they came clean. Turns out they actually had problems with the sewage. Here's what happened. There was a lake further up the mountain, which was the lake they drew the water from. However, there wasn't much water in the lake this season, so they'd started also using water from the stream that ran down the side of the mountain. It was around this time that a soft drink can became lodged in the sewage system, causing the whole thing to overflow down the valley and into the stream where they drew their water from. I explained it wasn't a good idea to have the sewage treatment system uphill from the water supply, where it could flow into the water used for drinking if anything went wrong. I think they learned their lesson. And for me, it was another mystery solved.
That could be quite serious, couldn't it? Withholding that kind of information.
Yeah, they could have been prosecuted for not fully cooperating.
The ski operation was closed for a day, wasn't it? Which, you know, you can imagine how much money was involved in doing that. So they certainly must have suffered financially.
And they also suffered in terms of reputation, because once this thing got out into the media, it was as big as Ben here.
It's a bit of a worry, isn't it? Makes you wonder how much of our drinking water is actually safe.
Well, in this country, drinking water is usually safe. Most urban supplies in medium and large cities have safe water. Small water supplies around the country may not be so safe though. This includes water for camping grounds, small rural communities, sports clubs, marae, that kind of thing. It doesn't take much for a water supply to become contaminated.
One dead possum in the water tank.
Yeah, can make a lot of people very sick.
Outbreaks often occur when a combination of things go wrong. The source water is unusually dirty and the UV light has failed, or the chlorine has run out. Sometimes one thing could be anticipated and one isn't.
We had a situation a while back. Most of the students at a country school had been laid low by some kind of infection, a nasty diarrhea type illness. It only came to our notice because the school nurse contacted the health authorities to find out a safe way to clean up a lot of vomit. I was part of the investigation team that got sent to the school to have a look at the environment, you know, where the sewage discharge went to, and also looked at the drinking water system, looked at the kitchen.
How did you test the drinking water supplies? Did you just go to a tap and...
Well, yeah, it was quite a few samples. We did what we call E. coli testing. E. coli isn't usually harmful in itself, but if E. coli is found, it indicates there's fecal matter in the water. Sure enough, we found E. coli, which showed us that treatment had failed and that pathogens were getting through into the drinking water.
How did the treatment fail?
They had a UV treatment system, and there was a lot of organic material coming off the swamp. Lots of suspended particles which made the water cloudy. Without filters, before the water got to the UV, it wasn't able to work very well. Pathogens can sort of hide behind larger particles and so don't get zapped by the UV light. And then we found out later that the previous week the UV light had blown a bulb.
I think the UV bulb is blown. No, I'm not sure what size. Hold on, I'll have a look.
And a new bulb had arrived a couple of days later and he put it in, and in the interim had done nothing else. So it wasn't what you would call good water management, certainly not the way to do it. Even if he had chlorinated the water in the interim, it might have addressed most of the problem. They needed a contingency plan. If the main disinfection system fails, then do something else. Waiting around for a new bulb isn't enough.
So what was actually contaminating the water?
A neighbour was grazing cows around the water source. I think he even took cattle down to the swamp, which drained down into the school's property. They didn't know what they were drinking. If they'd have done some monitoring, they would have found out.
Yuck, that's disgusting.
Yep, so now they've got backup UV lights plus a new generator in case the power fails. And I hear they've got a new caretaker.
Yeah, I suppose you've got to take care if you're a caretaker. Tea, everybody.
Thanks. Cheers.